UN, you're a joke. Okay? The world has collectively decided that you are absolutely mental. The people who thinks that you're not mental are either uninformed or brainwashed morons. For those of you who are uninformed, the UN is populated by morons. They're the same people who are going to ban animes and mangas for apparently perpetuating sexual violence towards women, as if fictional 2D characters are able to do such a monstrous thing. These people can just seriously go screw themselves because they're nothing but a joke. But the thing is, they're big. They're covering up lots and lots of parts of the entire world, and that's what concerns me. I really hope that nobody takes this joke of an organization seriously, but the moves that they're gonna pull are to the point where all bets are off. I know you did some shady garbage, but this kind of action just goes to show you how much of a piece of garbage you are. I know I'm unusually ranty, but I hate the UN. I just hate them. They're the kinds of organizations that I can happily tell to go screw themselves and die in a fire. For God's sake, they appoint Saudi Arabia as their human rights council. The kinds of country that would abuse the living garbage out of human rights if you disagree with them. They're a terrible organization. And here's what they're gonna do right now.
Here's why the UN is getting interested in video games. New report praises games that build understanding.
Video games do not build empathy, UN. Talking to people builds empathy. Jesus Christ. I'm a goddamn shut-in who makes dumb videos off of the internet, and if I have to tell you that basic fact, something is clearly wrong with your head. Or maybe the UN is talking about how video games can build empathy. Okay, the experts at the UN, I challenge you. How can video games build empathy?
Many of us have experienced playing a game that changed our mind or our heart. Perhaps it was about injustices or visited upon people who live different lives to our own, or it was about an ailment of illness sitting at the periphery of our own experience, or maybe it challenged lazy assumptions about otherness.
Let's talk about that. I don't believe any sort of study that proves that video games make you insert traits here. Because let's be freaking honest here, video games are just tools. When they're left alone, they're nothing but computer programs being programmed to entertain you. They can be only influential if you chose to make them. People can play video games and still be productive members of society. People can play video games and can be absolute lazy shut-ins. People can play video games and enjoy the living hell out of them. People can play video games and also not enjoy the living hell out of them. Video games will only impact your life if you let it impact you. You cannot prove that video games make you a diligent person by showing a study that proves it to your parents while you're shutting yourself in a room playing WoW for 10 hours straight for more than a week. What makes you diligent is not video games. What makes you diligent is you. And video games can in some ways help that, but it's not something that is universal.
Paul Darvasi is a teacher at the Royal St. George College in Toronto. He uses GAVE to teach his English students about alternative forms of narrative to linear forms like novels, films, and plays. He's also the author of a new report commissioned by UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, which seeks to find ways in which games can be used to foster empathy and understanding around the world.
So this is an expert on this situation, and I'm just a 19-year-old hikikomori YouTuber who barely got his third semester in college. Let's see what he's trying to propose with this report.
According to this report, 180,000 people died in 42 conflicts in 2014. The source of many of these conflicts is hostility between groups of people with different cultures and worldviews. Video games are not going to change human nature, but they can help those people, like UNESCO, who are trying to make a difference by diminishing suspicion and rage through empathy.
So, this is their goal here. They're trying to counter rage built through the war by video games. Just goes to show you how incredibly not serious the UN in handling war issues. Guys. Let's stop all the hate. Let's stop all the rage. Let's stop this mindless violence against each other. We can just play some video. Unbelievable. As if you need more reason to hate the UN.
Darvasi's report, Empathy, Perspective, and Complicity, How Digital Games Can Support Peace, Education, and Conflict Resolution, focuses on
Wait. How? How are you going to use video games to conflict resolution? Guys, the war in Syria, guys, it can't be stopped. We're just gonna give people free copies of Doom 2016. Come on. We can stop the war, guys. Just give them free copies of Doom 2016. It will definitely stop the war.
Perspective taking helps negotiate social complexities, diminish biases, improve intergroup attitudes, and encourage a view of outgroups as more self-like. The potential to positively impact attitudes with digital games is not only rooted in their ability to grant perspective, but also in their potency as instruments of persuasion.
As in, we can persuade people from the horrors of war by showing how the world is not black and white if you take it on another perspective. Now the UN is implying that we're freaking morons.
If you read the literature conflicting resolution, perspective taking is very important in order to reconcile opposing points of view. It's difficult to have empathy if you can't put yourself into somebody else's perspective. Video games allow you to assume perspectives in an embodied form.
Yes, there are games in which I take the shoes of gangbangers and I empathize with the characters of the game, even if they're all horrendous drug dealers and criminals. Does that mean I'm gonna be more empathetic to gangbangers in general? No, I'll be more empathetic to the characters in GTA 5, but not actual freaking gangsters. It's almost like fiction is different from reality or something. And the thing is, this is coming from the UN, who are willing to take the perspective of a bunch of easily triggered feminists, but not the perspective of actual gamers that are being attacked by these easily triggered feminists. As much as they tried to respect the medium, they did not respect its consumers. And speaking of fiction and reality, there are still morons out there who still cannot distinct between fiction and reality. Like this guy over here, a verified account on Twitter.
Stab Nazis in Call of Duty. Everybody, yeah! Brad Pitt kills Nazi in the movie. Everybody, yeah! Punches a real-life Nazi? Wait. Hold up now.
Hey, I once got called a Nazi white wannabe. Does that mean that I deserve to be punched, you goddamn dickhead? Who gets to decide who is and who isn't a Nazi? Nazi has lost all meaning right now. It now means people I disagree with. It's the same as racist. Which means that you're gonna get punched if you disagree with people who call you a Nazi. That's a little bit fascistic, don't you think?
Do conservatives and liberals who played Call of Duty 2 see the irony in condemning someone too piercing Richard Spencer, a literal Nazi?
Assuming that Richard Spencer is actually a Nazi, his worst crime is having Nazi thoughts. Your worst crime is punching him in the face. Congratulations on making me sympathize with a Nazi, you goddamn moron.
If you ever wondered if you'd be a hero or a coward in World War II, ask yourself if you actually tweeted sympathy for a literal Nazi getting punched.
World War II is not in 2017, you moron! You know what? I'd rather be a coward than a lunatic anarchist.
America, set an explosive on a Nazi and teabag him on Xbox Live, but God forbid a real one gets punched.
Just replace Nazi with people I don't like and see how freaking horrifying that sounds. Also, fiction is not real life, you freaking monkey. Let's get back to the UN. This is just too stupid.
When you watch the news of a documentary, you might not feel connected to the issue, but video games immerse you in the action. Your actions have consequences within the game, and therefore there's a greater emotional and cognitive investment.
Are you talking about making Telltale-style games or visual novels?
Darvasi says UNESCO approached him following heightened internal interest in video games as teaching tools. His vocal enthusiasm for the issue brought him to the organization's attention.
Because UNESCO is interested on turning video games into propaganda machines. No, I'm not kidding, that's literally the next part.
Darvasi also focuses on the number of games that illustrate this point. These include Peacemaker, in which the player takes place on the role of either the Israeli Prime Minister or the Palestinian President to achieve a two-state solution. He says the game is successful because players must think about the needs of their own stakeholders and constituents as well as their opponents' mindsets and circumstances.
I have never heard of this game ever, so the impact of this game to the actual Israel-Palestine war at large is unquantifiable at best. Give me something more impactful, please.
Hush is also mentioned, in which Rwandan Tutsi's mother, Liliane, must quieten her child to a written game mechanic in order to keep them both from being discovered and murdered.
The Hush game links into a Gama Sutra article, which I'm not gonna touch with a 10-foot pole.
This war of mine is also profiled, most particularly because of its wildly praised moral choices in which the player tries to survive in a war-ravaged city, sometimes by hurting innocent people.
Oh, you're gonna cite one of my favorite games of the past couple of years too. This war of mine has indeed strong anti-war messages being riddled throughout, and it does build in a lot of desperation and high emotional tension. The anti-war message is strong on the context on its own fictional setting, but it doesn't have a strong impact to the real world. It is an emotional and impactful game that does build empathy, and I highly recommend it, but only when you're playing it. When you're out of the game, you go back to real world logic. The empathy that you build are only to those characters in the game alone, because you're interacting with them in the game. You cannot build empathy to real world people by using a game of whose characters are in a fictional setting.
But the game which garners the most attention is Ink Stories' 1979 Revolution Black Friday, a 2016 narrative-driven game that offers players through dialogue and action choices. It puts the player in the role of a photojournalist covering the overthrow of a Shah in Iran 38 years ago. The game was widely praised by critics for telling a convincing story about a real-world event without resorting to preachy sentimentality. 1979 Revolution has been condemned by the Iranian government as American propaganda, a charge its makers strenuously deny.
Ah, yes, 1979 Revolution, a game that got on my radar, but I didn't have a chance to play it, unfortunately. Now, let's take that game and see how this person who got selected by the UNESCO take it.
You ask to make very complex ethical decisions every step of the way. They're not black and white, good and evil type decisions that you would get in a lens nuanced game. They put you in the position of somebody who has to make very difficult decisions. You often don't have the opportunity to make a positive ethical decision. The power of that is substantial.
So, you're praising a game for having gray and gray morality and giving the players options for making difficult decisions. Sir, what kind of cave have you been living in? Gray and gray morality existed in video games for years, particularly in RPG games like Deus Ex. There are tons of issues in video games in which it is never clear on who the good guys really are. Yes, games have emotionally driven choices and consequences that are significant and substantial for the game. How is this going to build empathy to war victims or heroes during the 1979 revolution?
1979 Revolution is an important milestone in political gaming, partly because it addresses one of the gaming's most popular subjects, conflict in the Middle East. But instead of the usual shooting gallery of brown bad guys, it offers something much more subtle and illuminating.
Quick Wikipedia glance revealed that there are quite a number of shootings in the Iranian Revolution, so you can try to at least make a game about shooting brown dudes by other brown dudes, but it won't be really fun though. Also, the most popular subject on the game is conflict in the Middle East. Again, what kind of cave have you been living in? The latest Call of Duty is like crazy sci-fi space battle warfare, and Battlefield is doing World War I.
In the West, Iran has been reduced to a simplistic idea, and video games are partly responsible for fostering these crude stereotypes.
Name me these video games that perpetuate these crude stereotypes, please. And name me the consequences of having these crude stereotypes in freaking fiction.
Ink Stories' founder, Naviz Koransi, was raised in Iran but moved to Canada at around the time of revolution. He has spent his career making games as well as documentaries. His company is an attempt to fuse these activities to Verite Games, a play of the cinema verite movement of observational documentary filmmaking. I feel that interactive experiences are the strongest experience that we have to engage people with what's taking place in the world. You're in it, you get to control your own narrative.
I wouldn't worry too much, except this guy is making an interactive story off of a real-world event. I'm afraid there's gonna be a little bit of a bias.
You can create an understanding that eventually leads to feelings of empathy and understanding. In our time, we get our news through Facebook clips, which are condensed but also shallow. The strength of games is that they can have an impact in the long term on people's comprehension and understanding and views of one another.
Okay, I'll stop you right there. You showed that video games can gain empathy and understanding. Good work. So, what will you do with this information? That's the question, right? What will the UN do with this sort of information? The UN realizes that video games can be used as a tool to gain empathy and understanding. Knowing the history of the UN, has there ever any thought that they're gonna use this information in a malicious manner? As in, they're gonna use video games to create empathy and understanding to the wrong people. I don't know, but that's just me.
Now that's Darvasi's UNESCO report is complete. What does he think about people who say that video games ought to just be a bit of fun without any political elements?
Let me guess. Screw those unintelligent, dim-witted gamers, right?
There's implicit politics in every game. You can look at GTA 5 as a space for neoliberal values where the government has disappeared completely and the Wild West of the free market has taken over.
What? Have you played GTA? Government forces like cops, the armies, the FIBs, the IAAs, they're like the huge parts of the game. You're well aware that the Wild West have sheriffs too, right?
I think of every video game as a text, and a text is acceptable to any number of political readings. It's a mistake to oversimplify them and to think they're devoid of political content. Some games are more deliberately political. 1979 Revolution is certainly more political than Tetris, but I believe that you can yield a political reading from a game like Tetris if you look hard enough and from the right angle.
You know, like how Tetris can brainwash you with Russian propaganda. This is how an ideologue see video games. They see video games as a propaganda machine. If it can be used to send messages of what kind of causes that we're fighting, then it's damn good. Video games is the greatest art form ever existed because it can be used as a political propaganda. But when it's not, it's sexist, misogynist, and racist. God damn UN. Just also UNESCO too, because what the hell?
Ultimately, the work of people like Darvasi, as well as those making games with clear political messages, is an antidote to the sometimes lazy and crass politics of mainstream games.
Lazy and crass politics of mainstream games. Of course you're gonna say that, you goddamn freaking ideologue. Screw you with a 10-foot pole. My god, that's what you give a damn about. You give a damn about how the game is handling the politics because you're an ideologue. You don't give a damn about how fun the game is or whether or not it's a good game. No, you give a damn on whether or not the games can actually send the messages of your ideology. You give a damn about the intricacies of the internal politics of Russian hackers off of Tetris. Do you know why I hate the UN so much? Do you know why I hate polygons so much?
The goal is to move people towards looking at the events from an informed perspective as opposed to a superficial understanding of the world.
Oh my god, I really want to smack my head down to a freaking table. Video games are not a place in which you're gonna get an informed perspective. It's a place where it's freaking fiction and we can have lots of fun. This smug jackass implies that people are buying the superficial understanding of the world that video games give. As if video games are supposed to be your teacher in how the world works or something. As if people are brainwashed morons who believe 100% the things that those goddamn media gave. This is the UN's freaking mindset on the entire thing. They see video games as a teacher, as a way to propagandize a particular message, a particular ideology. This is why people don't really care whether or not video games are fun or whether or not video games are entertaining. They only care on whether or not video games can send the messages on their ideologies. So in the end, the UN wants to take your video games and use it as a political propaganda. I have two messages for you. One, screw you. And two, you want to make a game that is nothing but political propaganda of a particular narrative that you want people to really buy so that it benefits you. Well, good freaking luck, UN. Good freaking luck. That's all for the video today. If you like this, you can go ahead and click the like button and subscribe for more. If you wish, you can support me on Patreon. And thanks for watching.